Ready.
Hello, everybody. My name is Christine Darkis, and I have the privilege of being the Executive Officer of the Melbourne Women's Fund. It's great to see you all here today. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are each gathering today. Where we are running this webinar, they are the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and future. Family foundations are a major yet sometimes mysterious contributors in philanthropy that make an enormous contribution to communities across Australia. Several have legacies that are based on extraordinary stories, and today's event will certainly be an example of that. Some of you may be thinking of establishing one. Some of you may already be running one. And some of you, the grant seekers, may be looking for tips for how to penetrate the approximately $400 million they make in grants annually. Hopefully, today's event will provide some benefit for all of you. Here to share her insights about the reality of family foundations is Melbourne Women's Fund member Belinda Bardas. As a contributing member of the Bardas Family Foundation and 4S Foundation and trustee of the Lottie and Victor Smorgan Family Foundation, Belinda has an extraordinary amount of experience in this realm to share with you. Today, she'll be interviewed by our very own Melbourne Women's Fund co-founder, who is also Philanthropy Australia's Victoria and Tasmania manager, Patricia Burke, OAM. In her role with Philanthropy Australia, Pat works extensively with family foundations, so is very familiar with this landscape as well. But before we proceed, a bit of housekeeping. This meeting is being recorded. For best viewing, click on View at the top right of your screen, then tick Speaker. Please use the chat box to ask questions throughout the presentation and the 15-minute Q&A session near the end, and we'll do our best to get to them all. But please stay on mute unless we need to reach out to you to clarify a question. And if you're comfortable doing so, please turn on your video functions so we can see your smiling faces. Now, it's my pleasure to turn you over to Belinda Bardas and Patricia Burke, OAM.
Thank you, Christine. That was a gorgeous opener, and it's a pleasure to be in the Zoom room with all of you. And as we were chatting earlier, as everyone was coming in, we look forward to very soon having a chance where we can all come together. But in the meantime, it's pretty special to be sitting right next to Belinda as opposed to having our Zoom boxes talking to each other. So we will hope that that makes it more of an interesting, real conversation for all of you to enjoy. Because I think we're already having a great time just sitting near each other. I want to start it out by saying a couple things about family philanthropy to kick it off and to sort of set the context for our discussion with Belinda. There's a history of family philanthropy in Australia, and apart from a handful of prominent families in this country, much of it has been quite private up until the past decade or so. Philanthropy is evolving, and we live in a time where more of our family philanthropists are sharing their stories of giving. And through that transparency, they're positively influencing our giving and contributing to the evolution of philanthropy more broadly. Belinda has been deeply involved with 3 different family foundations, and she approaches her philanthropy with a clear-headed intelligence and a heart that is warm and humble. We have the chance in this hour to learn from her forward-thinking approach. So I'll start with the 2013 news piece that paid tribute to Lottie Smorgan, and it mentioned Lottie and Victor's belief in the importance of giving, that it was passed to the 4 daughters, and that Lottie was considered to be a groundbreaking cultural philanthropist who, and I quote, paved the way for many of Australia's philanthropists. The article ends by saying that Lottie and Victor were an inspiration to us all. So with that in mind, and we're sitting, the background that Belinda will tell you about, we've purposely chosen what's behind us. But with that in mind, can we start at the beginning with the story of Lottie and Victor coming to Australia, their legacy, and how it has influenced the family's life?
Thank you, Pat, and thank you to the Melbourne Women's Fund for inviting me to speak. It's really an honour, thank you. Okay, Lottie and Victor, they arrived in Australia in 1927, both as very young people. Victor was 13 and Lottie was the ripe old age of 8. She came from Poland and he came from Russia. And they were welcomed into a very small but growing Jewish community where the belief was that those that came before you would help the newest arrivals. And I suppose that is the beginning of the story. They didn't know each other for a number of years in that time, but by 1937 they got married. Lottie was 18 and Victor was 23. I think about that now and go, I have a 17-year-old daughter. I don't imagine her being married at 18. Anyway, you know, they both were fleeing oppressive regimes, and to come to Australia and to see the incredible opportunities, and that is something that I'm going to say Papa, Victor, talked about all the time. He said, this is the land of opportunity. We've been incredibly fortunate to have arrived here and to be able to make roots and to grow. And that was the beginning. So on that, I would, answering your question, I think being Jewish, the idea of giving, there's a Jewish tradition, it's called tzedakah, and it's the obligation to give to others. And how you do that, you can do in many ways, but that was, I suppose I heard about that my whole life. And I'm sure my mother and her sisters heard about it as well. And so it's very ingrained in the way we do anything in the world, in business, in philanthropy, in life. And they had a really strong belief in giving back to the community across a range of different issues. And I can talk today, they, well, actually, depends on which hat I've got on, but the Victor Smorgon Charitable Fund, which it was known as for the last 33 years. And in the last year, we've changed the name, and which I fought very hard for, which is now the Lottie and Victor Smorgon Family Foundation. And that was to include Lottie in the heading, really, to acknowledge her participation and influence on philanthropy.
Timely, considering we're going into International Women's Day.
Yes.
Some of us are going to events and all the chatter that's going on across this country about women. So the values, so you touched on that significant value that Papa passed on throughout the family. I want to call it that. But so what other values? So obviously great concern for the community. But what other values drive your giving?
Oh, there's so many.
Yeah.
It's really about giving back to the community and whatever community is that you belong to, and then the broader community. Papa always talked about, I mean, one of his, the charitable foundation was really set up to affect many. So that I suppose that's the core piece of work. So they always like to do work that would, you know, that's why you see their name on lots of buildings, and it's also that old style of philanthropy. But they liked to see people being able to walk through the door, and anyone, all Australians, not just Jewish community, not just a specific community, but everybody.
I was telling Belinda when we were preparing for this that I had seen Lottie and Victor Smorgon's name at the triennial at the NGV, and I knew you told me a quick story about that gift to the NGV and how transformative those gifts have been. We also wanted to ask you, so when we look at the three different family foundations, I think for those of us from the outside looking in, that's part of the interesting part about family philanthropy, is that the multi-generational sort of evolution of different structures and how one influences the other. Can you sort of speak to that? We might need a whiteboard. But
I've simplified it just to talk about today. But the Lottie and Victor's Morgan Family Foundation is a charitable trust. It was set up in 1988, so it's now 33 years old. I actually went back and had a look at the trust deed earlier this week to think about our conversation, and it is so broad.
But that's good.
It's fantastic because it really leaves a lot of avenues open. And it's also sometimes very challenging because you go, well, would we like to be more focused, or could we be more directive? And yes, they have been in the arts world. And I suppose the leading areas for the charitable fund is advancing health, social and public welfare, arts and culture, and respect and tolerance. Probably the top areas that we focus on. Whereas the 4S Foundation was set up by Lottie and Victor's 4 daughters, and in response to them not having a voice at the table for the charitable fund. And even though they were trustees, they weren't able to contribute. And I think Eve probably knows this very well as a former trustee of charitable fund. So they chose, and I think it's 15 years ago, to set up the 4S Foundation, which is a PAF. And our focus in 4S is completely different. It's grassroots initiatives, and where we can really have impact on small scale not-for-profits. And interestingly, we are starting to see now with the things that we're funded through 4S, some of them have grown to a point where we can introduce them to charitable because they're ready for that next stage, to be translational into other kind of funding rounds. So that's exciting to see happen, but it's very different.
That was one of the things that we loved about 4S and your story, is that it feels a bit, it's aligned a bit with the sort of work that we do at Melbourne Women's Fund. It's grassroots and transformative. So
I'm just going to read it to you. The 4S Foundation supports human rights, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, education, children and the environment through innovative initiatives that either have a starfish effect or create systematic structural change. And I'm reading it because it's quite new. So we've gone from a more simple idealism to really thinking more about what specifically is it that we want to do. And we do it with love, communication and integrity. That's,
those are the values.
There are values,
yeah.
And in here we have the courage and creativity to enhance the world we live in. So,
that's fantastic. And I just love the story of the transformation from that one generation to the next, doing it your own way. And then there's another one.
And then there's another one. So there's the Bardas Foundation. Now, it's not a formal foundation. It is still very much philanthropic giving from working capital. And so that's the other side. That's more my father and my siblings. I'm one of 6. And currently that is very much in my father's hands, and he still directs it. But slowly but surely we're having more and more influence. My sister Ellie runs that with him. But we have conversations really regularly about what it is that we do in the world and how Sandra's impact or her legacy influences what we do for Bardas Foundation.
So How do you juggle your time as a trustee or director with 3 different entities?
I'm not very disciplined. Well, I officially work in the Victor Smorgon Group office doing charitable work for 2 days a week. And for us, we meet fortnightly for the morning every Wednesday.
Yeah.
And, one's very formal and the other one is very informal. It's the Forest Foundation. When I came in, I suppose I didn't come in right at the beginning, but maybe a year or 2 after it had been established.
Okay.
And all my generation, so including the next generation, we all had young children. So they all used to come and sit at the table and there'd be aunties cuddling and drawing and playing games and talking about what we wanted to do. It was really beautiful. So right now, I know we're going to talk about intergeneration, but right now we're in a kind of lag space where the next generation, they're 17, 18, 19, 20, up to, I think, late 20s, and they're not really ready to come in yet. They're not having their children, they're very focused on finishing school or university and getting their first jobs, and they're full. So we sort of have to be patient and wait for them to come in, but we do communicate a lot to them about what we're doing.
And do they from time to time feed up ideas into the conversation?
On that, I know this will feed into one of the later questions, is we are a family-directed foundation. It doesn't matter for every single structure. So we don't take outside applications. You can't apply to us. We, if it's a personal interest, and I think that also goes into what we'll talk about later, is if somebody at the table has an interest or an idea about a theme, then we discuss it and then we'll go out and look for things that work within it.
We talked, as we were preparing, about trying to tease out some of the work that you funded that you're most proud of across the whole gamut of the 3 structures, and I suppose for us in particular. So what you're most proud of and feel has had the most impact, and I think there was, I want to lead you towards the positive impact on Indigenous women and children, that there was a project that you mentioned there as well.
Oh, there's 2 that I can think of that are quite current. The National Justice League, and we've funded a young lady, I don't know how young she is, it was a young lady, she's a law student, an Aboriginal law student, and we're funding her position at the National Justice League to be able to work and to have influence and to fully help round out what they're doing there. So her direction and her focus is on Indigenous issues. So we had a meeting with them quite recently and they were talking about some of the things that they're doing, and it's powerful and has huge impact and implication for future cases in Australia on Aboriginal rights.
So it's that powerful small grant that you're aiming 100%. To have ripple effect.
I suppose that's the starfish.
Yeah, starfish.
The other one I might just talk about is the Padame School in Central Australia. We, through common interests, we met a young lady who was working with a group of Aboriginal women. It was a family, actually. We ended up going to visit them, and the aunties and some of my cousins and I went and sat in the dirt and learnt about what it was that they were interested in doing. And it was really about language and making sure that they didn't lose their language, and they wanted to teach their kids. And very long story short, a long-lost relative arrived on their doorstep, a young woman who had done languages as her university degree, and she was one of their family. And I have to say, to Vanessa's credit, she's been incredible. She's put together these wonderful programs that are now at the stage where they could be replicated and help support other Indigenous language groups revive their language. And they do it in such a fun, creative way that leaves resources for the community. And I think that's just wonderful.
The power of storytelling, and that comes through so much in philanthropy more broadly, but in family philanthropy, and especially this kind that's from the heart. What we've got, Melbourne Women's Fund is by women, for women and families. And what advice would you give for women to inspire their giving? And this is good. We've got some preparation going on here.
Start small. Find your passion, and you might do that. You might already know what that passion is, or you might have a few ideas. And I would suggest getting together with a professional, or just come together with a group of people to discuss it and really learn about it. Then focus and learn. I can't actually emphasize the learning side enough.
Be prepared to fail.
Oh, absolutely. Or I've joined a philanthropic community, or whether it's Melbourne Women's Fund or Philanthropy Australia or Australian Jewish Funders, whatever it is. Like, join several, learn, find out what's going on, find out your passion points, and start to dig in and chew it, and be prepared to fail. Be prepared to take strategic risks and keep learning, and learn from your failures. We certainly have. We've had a few.
There's a humility there that I find wonderful. The testing and the trying and the consulting with others, and the constant effort to keep learning.
I just think you have to surround yourself with people who know more than you do, and be curious. Be really, really curious about whatever your focus is, and just keep learning. And that's how you grow, and that's how you get to be in my position and get to speak. I mean, if you had said to me 12 years ago when I first started on this journey that I would be speaking, I would have said, absolutely no way, don't know anything. But I surrounded myself with experts. I stand on the shoulders of giants, and I really believe in the importance of having great teams around you.
Just interesting observation, isn't on the list, but that through those years of learning and testing and trying and consulting with other people and being part of the community, you end up realizing the right questions to ask along the way. I mean, what are your thoughts about that? Because I think that's one of the difficult things when you enter a new endeavor of any sort. Is you're often the quiet person in the corner or in the back of the room, just absorbing and learning and learning. And after a certain point, you realize what are the questions that are important to ask. It takes a while.
It does take a while, and sometimes whatever that burning question is that you have, just say it out loud, because there's definitely people in the room who have the same question, and there's no such thing as a dumb question. I really think that, just because you can get lost in a conversation if you're stuck on not understanding one point.
And we've talked about women and inspiring their giving. If we link it back to knowing what you know after years of experience in family philanthropy, what advice would you give to someone who actually wants to establish a family foundation at the start of their journey of family giving? Because we know that what everyone's telling us over the time that we're living in, that there's an intergenerational wealth transfer on the edge with baby boomers and all of it. So there's and many women will be inheriting, and they'll have an opportunity, whether they've made the money on their own as successful business women or inheriting. If you were starting from the beginning,
I would say start now, start small. Maybe going back to my advice is be really curious about something and begin. Like, there's nothing more exhilarating and more empowering than actually beginning the journey, and then surround yourself with experts and people who can actually support you on your journey, because I think there's two sides of that philanthropic journey. There's finding your passion and knowing who you want to be within your philanthropic journey, but there's also then the structural side and the tax and all those things. You know, do you want to be a PAF? Do you want to be
Many options now.
exactly a PUAF, a trust? So I think that's too hard to speak to. I think really you need to find your trusted advisor, and there's many out there now. I think some really good ones that you can go to and say, this is what I'm thinking about doing. And I think just the three examples that I gave, Bardas Foundation, we're still doing it from working capital, because I suppose we haven't had an event at this point that we want to put funds into a corpus, but we still believe really strongly in giving, and so we just do it anyway, you know.
And it gives you the flexibility. Now I'm feeling like we're being a little bit greedy. Christine, at what point do we turn over questions? I'm going rogue and not looking at the agenda.
All the time.
All the time.
My clock's a bit fast.
I know, the clock is fast. I can ask one or two more. Or you're muted, Christine.
Okay.
There you
Listen, you've probably got another 10 to 15 minutes, actually. And we do have a question that's come in from Loretta.
Oh, good.
Do your three philanthropic entities collaborate?
No, but in saying no, there's also a yes. So because I'm the common thread with all three, the discussions filter across the three, and because the way we give is so different in each of the three, no, there's not room for that real collaborative piece. But we do collaborate. Like for Lottie and Victor Morgan Charitable Fund, you know, we are beginning to do that collaborative piece with other funders more and more focused, and I don't know what it is. Yes, so yes and no.
Even co-funding.
So we definitely do co-funding. It might not be as collaborative as something I saw recently. The My Foundation and Ramsey and doing their leadership series. I mean, that piece of work is spectacular and exciting to see, and really truly collaborative. So I think
starting from the beginning to co-design something. Yeah. Do you think there's capacity or interest to do something? You might have
maybe not across the three.
Yeah.
But we do. With Forest Foundation, we're constantly going out to other funders with things that, especially that things we've had success with, because that's offering your time, talent, treasure, and ties. Like, we know how wonderful an organisation can be, so we introduce them or invite others to come and learn about an organisation that we love.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the due diligence.
Absolutely, yeah.
To that. Yeah. So what a good one to ask is advice that you have for not-for-profits seeking to engage with family foundations. And I think that question comes up a lot, and it can be a hard one.
Well, I might reiterate that we are family-led. We don't take outside applications. However, in saying that, I also mentioned joining lots of networks and engaging with other people, and learn about the philanthropists that you're talking to, and find out what they're interested in. And if you're not, if you don't have something that is in their wheelhouse, don't waste their time, move on. But if you do, then start a real conversation and invite us to have, to engage more and have a look. And it's really a relationship. It doesn't just happen like that. No funding ever happens hi, I've met you, unless it's on the street, and I'll use Sally's Brown Stardust example, but all funding happens from relationship. Well, in my experience, I know there are big foundations that maybe less, I mean, always on the relationship, but less from the heart. I would just connect.
And that leads right into grant decision-making processes, because that's what you were leading towards. That we were chatting earlier, some of the really large funding organizations that have grants, program managers, and people who are really this is their day job, and they're looking at monitoring and evaluation and all of it. And my sense of family foundations is that perhaps there's more of a balance of head and heart. And it's still, I mean, philanthropy, the wonderful thing about it is that we can do it so many different ways. It's self-directed. But how would you be able to sort of describe how your decision-making process works when you're considering funding an organization?
Well, first and foremost, we check on their status. So we really do our due diligence, make sure they are who they say they are, that they have. It is really important for us that they have DGR. Occasionally we don't fund DGR, but that's pretty rare. So we do the due diligence, and then we come back and start to discuss it, and then we might invite them in for a conversation, or we might go and have a look. And depends on which hat I have on, depends on which process, but pretty much we follow the same process after that. We then will send out what's the word I'm looking for? Expression. So we'll ask them to put in their forms, and and then we come back and we again discuss it, and sometimes for a long time, maybe sometimes it's for years. We get there eventually.
No, that's brilliant.
Sometimes it's very quick. So we follow a pretty diligent process. Thank you, Ricky.
This question's unplanned, but when you think of bushfires and COVID, and last year was so transformative for everyone, and watching our funders and the doing organizations respond, and advice that came out from Philanthropy Australia and others around the best things that funders could do. Were there interesting? I would imagine there would have been some interesting conversations amongst the three families around how to respond and what can you do, particularly when the world is having such a tough time. Did that?
We are not quick responders to crisis. We're not really crisis funders. However, in saying that, we will sit back and wait and then look for what else, where are the gaps? What else needs to be done? We don't want to just pile in money into someone else's big fund. That's not very interesting for us. We would rather find the opportunity or find the gap that really needs funding now, and then we'll help it that way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. There's a lot of that going on. There's still a lot of philanthropists still talking about what they can do now that the dust has settled a bit, particularly with bushfires.
I think during COVID, if we can talk about that, we really doubled down on the organisations that we have a relationship with, and we didn't really go out looking for new things to fund. We really stayed with the people who that we had the relationship with, that needed that constant support and hand-holding, and it became less about programs and things, more about just helping their capacity.
Yeah, and that's brilliant. That was a big theme of last year, and continues to be with Pay What It Takes philanthropy.
It's challenging. Well, we still have those conversations occasionally about, like, what are we funding? Why does the organisation need to be funded? And we know the arguments for that, but sometimes we still have to tease out why it is we're going there.
And so you stay close through the relationships, obviously, with those fundees as close. So,
I think the best way to piss off a philanthropist is to not communicate.
I think that's,
In fact, we perfectly honest, or just you've taken the money and then you disappear. Like there's no relationship in that.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen very often. It does occasionally.
Yep.
Yeah.
Boy, I know. That's an interesting one.
Right. And even, do you know even when a not-for-profit has a program that you might have funded and it goes awry, we still want to hear about it and learn from that experience, learn what we might do different, and give them the opportunity to say, well, we failed miserably in deliverables and we actually realised that our approach is wrong. We still have some of the money and this is an idea that we have. Okay. Like, we're happier when people are communicating.
Yes. And I would think you'd
The good, the bad, the ugly.
a lot to facilitate that communication, but when it goes cold, that would be.
I think our spidery senses know now when someone goes cold. It was like, they need a phone call.
Just pick up the phone and check in. That's fantastic. And that really, we had a question about what's the involvement after the grant. And part of it is with our Giving Circle audience. One of the bits of magic in collective giving is that connection to the organizations that we fund, and there's so many individuals who've been part of our Giving Circle who are now on boards of the organizations we've supported, or they've continued to volunteer or connect them. When you said the final one, so time, talent, treasure, ties.
Ties are so important. We forget about those a lot. Yeah. And I think that's it. Just to get involved and take a role within an organisation, or just immerse yourself, or go to uni and learn more. Or not.
Or not.
Read. There's tons of books too. There's fantastic books out there.
Oh, there's so much to read about philanthropy and giving. There's our bedside tables would be falling over with books. Long term, what is the plan for the next generation? And I know for them to grow up maybe and not but and I know we touched on this about involving your children and grandchildren, but if you could just blue sky for a moment, what would you like it to be like in 10 or 20 years, or maybe even longer? How would you see it evolving with your children and their children? I mean,
well, I suppose my generation definitely are still encouraging our children to be philanthropic in their style. So one of the things that we do through charitable is that we have enabled each one of the grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Grandchildren have one amount, great-grandchildren have another amount. No questions asked other than it is DGR. If you put your time, talent, treasure or ties into an organisation, so if you're contributing your energy in any way, then we will match that with a fixed number, and do it in your name. So to recognise your contribution to that organisation. And that started off very slowly, and it's starting to build momentum. And I'm third, so fourth generation is starting to pick that up as they're becoming more involved with going to university and seeing things that they're interested in. It's quite diverse and it's great. We're learning a lot from them.
And then do the kids come back? Kids, but do they sort of?
They haven't come back yet.
You're waiting for the stories. Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear what some of them are discovering, and what their thoughts are, what their passions would be. Because we expect, climate is such a big deal with our youth. I mean, it's a big deal, period. But when we look at what the the deep passionate issues are for youth in general, it's often great
environment and social justice.
Yes.
They're the two main themes. I will say, going backwards a little bit, when I was growing up in our household, we talked about philanthropy a lot. We had a blue box, which is an organisation, JNF, you put coins in, and once a year they'd come and pick it up. But we all knew what that blue box was, and you could put some of your pocket money in, or any loose change that was lying around went in it. So a few years ago, we created a money box for our next generation. I think we've got it handy. And we gave it to everybody in the family, and we say to them occasionally, bring in your money box and we'll invest it and we'll spend it, or you spend it.
Yes.
So that tradition continues. So it's just a really, oh, there we are.
And it's so tangible. Oh, look at this. It's gorgeous. It looks like a big Lego.
Very easy to access. Mine gets raided a lot.
I love that.
So we do. In fact, we need to ask again. Bring it in.
Get out there.
But I think that makes it tangible.
That's what I like about it. Yeah, I think that's a very tradition. I don't have any more questions. I think
See, there might be some.
yeah.
Okay. Well, we have a question from Michelle from Lighthouse Foundation, who was our signature grant winner a couple of years ago. Through the year of the pandemic, the Lighthouse Foundation and many others, our funding streams were affected with the loss of event and corporate partner revenue, but the philanthropic trust revenue held on strongly. This was extremely encouraging to see that loyalty and commitment from long-term partners. Many funders decided to allow specific funding to be released into general organizational funding. Did this happen with your family trusts?
It most certainly did. Yeah, especially in the long-term relationships. Michelle will know we've been long-time partners of the Lighthouse Foundation. My Auntie Vicky was a founding member.
Yes.
So there's been some fantastic examples in the family of generational examples of real leaders out there following their passion, not just the family passion.
Right.
So that went off topic, but yes, we did, Michelle.
Great. And another question that we've had is the power of small grants. I don't know if you guys touched on that, but you know, there's this impression that you really need to have a huge grant to make a difference. Could you speak a little bit about really the sort of difference you've seen as a result of making small grants, and really what the magnitude, what's the range of grant giving that you give as well?
Okay, so I'll talk about the Forest Foundation. Our small grants range from about, the smallest would be 2,500, very uncommon. We do 5, 10, 15, maybe 20. Occasionally they're bigger than that, but that's occasional. Or it might be after we've been involved with an organisation for a number of years, where we've built the trust, we know what they're doing, and we can see them going from strength to strength, and we want to continue to support that. Sorry.
You need a coffee.
Oh yes, I definitely need the coffee.
So you actually,
so the impact. Sorry.
So you're a proponent of small grants. You believe that, you know.
Oh, we love them. They're actually so rewarding.
Yeah.
Because the relationships are very fresh. People, you know, they're at the beginning of their journey often. They're learning about their own not-for-profit or their own organisations. Sometimes it's just a person who is waving the flag strongly and needs support, and we will do that as well. And they're really rewarding, and they're very impactful, and we can see them.
Right.
Not all, but we see them. We invest in at that point we're investing in the people as much as the idea. It's not just an idea, it's the person who's leading it. If we believe in them and their capacity, we really just go, okay, let's go. We don't want to tell you what to do, just go do it. They come back and go, yay, we've done this and moved on to the next phase. Or they go, yeah, didn't get any traction. Okay, right. We learned something, but we haven't risked too much.
Terrific.
We love them. I have to tell you, I think it's my favourite space to work in.
This
is so rewarding. Yeah.
Awesome. And then also, Of the work you've funded, can you give us a couple of examples of what you've funded that has filled you with the most pride, that's been, you know, the most satisfying to you? Maybe a couple of examples of that. And by the way, you know, this is the question and answer section, so it's open to everybody. Just feel free to throw your questions into chat.
Sure. There's a few that come to mind. Maybe I might just talk about oh yes, let's talk about Sister Works.
Oh, they'll love that. That's good.
So we've been walking hand in hand with them for a couple of years. Clearly Luz is no longer there, but our relationship was definitely with Luz. And we got to the point of, what else do you actually need to help this organisation go to its next phase? Because it was butting up against its own limitations. So we helped fund, or we actually funded SVA to do a report to talk about their next steps, and then we were able to, with Sister Works, then present it to a much wider community. And because the research had been done and with facts and figures in place, they were able to then leverage that piece of work to get more funding. And that was very exciting. You know, from a smaller point of view, I can think of Royal Children's Hospital. We were in partnership with them for 10 years, and then it ended up being extended to 13. We, from charitable point of view, we funded, what was her name? Yep. The chair of paediatrics for gastrointestinal health, and she was working on a vaccine for for rotavirus, which kills millions of children in third world countries because of the dysentery. So her piece of research was about, how do you give a vaccine that we have in Australia to infants at birth, because mothers only go to hospital in third world countries for birth, maybe. And so we funded her and that project for a really long period of time. They then got funding from Gates Foundation, and then the rest is history. It's been rolled out. It's really exciting. Fantastic piece of work.
So you were the tester, really, of it.
Well, we just said, okay, we like that translational piece of work in medical research. So we don't want to be the first funders of, we've got an idea. We like to fund, we've got an idea, and we want to see how we can take it out to the world. Yeah. And then it goes back to affecting many.
It's very heartening to see your willingness to fund evaluation, as you did in the case of Sister Works. You know, often in philanthropy, we'll see funders that are kind of resistant about that. But you're absolutely right that in certain situations, it can be actually very, very key to assisting an organization to move into the next phase.
I could probably, I know there's a few women online from National Council of Jewish Women, Victoria. We've been working with them for a number of years on different projects, and then we've funded a building collaboration. We're just going to be very quick here. Baker Institute, diabetes. They've just recently got the 10-year report of the Victor Smorgon fund that was set up just specifically for this. And they're saying individual 50,000 patients, 30,000 appointments with allied health. It just got, they're the kind of things that we like the legacy to be for charitable.
Fabulous. Does anybody have any questions? Now's the time to throw them onto chat for Anybody?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So it's Diana from St Kilda Mums. Just wanted to say hi, and I actually, whilst I remember, you know how you mentioned the word tzedakah in Jewish means charity? Are you aware that it's the same word in Islam as well for charity?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, when you heard the word, because I'm a Muslim, when you said the word, I was like, well, hold on, that's what we say. So it literally means to give in charity, and every Muslim person has an obligation to give a certain amount of charity every year. So that was a bit of a light bulb moment. So thank you for sharing that.
It's a pleasure, and thank you for sharing that. That's really fantastic.
Sorry. Yeah. So I was listening very intently, and as you know, St Kilda Mums, Jessie McPherson, and the work that you've supported for us, and what we are today. A lot of it was, as you described, that growth from that grassroots organization to the sort of, you know, medium-sized organization and a bigger charity. So that's wonderful to see you talking about supporting something at that grassroots level. And, you know, I was like, that's Jessie who you supported. And as you know, she'll be flying the nest, and she's sort of resigned recently, but she'll be setting up her own social enterprise. And my question actually is nothing to do with all of this. It was just about how you talked about learning and how important it is to learn. And I'm interested in doing the graduate certificate in social impact, which I know that you've done. And I just wanted to know whether you thought it was a good course, and if you know of anything different or better.
Diana, I loved it, but it challenged me to the extreme. May I just say that I loved it, and so much of what I learnt there I now am able to apply to the conversations, and now I understand some of the conversations so much better, the complexity. But yes, it was very, very challenging for me.
Was it a one-year course?
I think I did the certificate over 2. I think you can do it in 1, but I stretched it out. I didn't have the time or the...
Yes, I guess it's hard when you've got family life and you have to juggle that. And actually, whilst I remember, are there any unusual projects that come to your mind when somebody thinks, you know, what have you funded that kind of really, remember when we funded that project and it was a little bit, oh, should we be doing this?
All of them are a little like that. They're all a bit like, oh, okay, it's a little bit left of field. Not quite sure what they're trying to do. But again, it's just it's very much about the relationship of whoever brings it to the table, and then it becomes our relationship as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay, anything else? Anybody else with any questions? Otherwise, we might actually move to wrap it up at this point. No?
No, I think that's...
Okay. By the way, we'll be sending out a very brief survey to all attendees to gather some feedback on today's session. This has been a really insightful dialogue and a testament to what women can achieve, and particularly as we turn our minds to International Women's Day, it's been quite apt. So speaking of women, as we move to close, a couple of words about Melbourne Women's Fund membership, particularly as a fair few of you are new to us. We are a giving circle, which means that your membership donation builds the funding pool that we then grant to hardworking nonprofits assisting vulnerable women and families in Melbourne. This year, the focus for our grants are employment and economic empowerment, homelessness, and family violence. As the COVID bite has reduced giving levels while increasing the demands for nonprofit services, your support is all the more important this year. To learn more about us, you just need to go to our website at melbournewomensfund.org. A huge thank you to Belinda Bardas for sharing her wealth of wisdom experience with us. Our special thanks to Patricia Burke, OAM, for her deaf navigation, which is based on no small amount of experience in this area as well. Also to Ricky Andrews, who was instrumental in setting up this event. For those of you who don't know Ricky, she is a sector leader with an impressive range of experience in developing.
I just want to say we couldn't do very much in this house without Ricky.
Yes, she also works quite closely with Belinda and her multiple family philanthropists. Thanks also to our very own events chair, Louise Potter, whose flexibility in running virtual or physical events in these strange times has been hugely valuable to us. And of course, our thanks to you for joining us. We hope you have a great weekend. Stay well. Happy International Women's Day, and we'll see you next time.